And you got an interesting story. So you actually started with your own product, which landed you on Shark Tank, right? So
Oh, yes. I was just using AliExpress, finding good AliExpress sellers, and whether sellers just, wouldn't tell them the truth, sending fake tracking numbers and things like that. And literally like entire businesses were just killed because of that, right?
What's going on, everyone? John here, Wolf Ecom. Excited to have my friend Dayu Yang with us. He is my go-to man in the fulfillment space with e-commerce. So I'll allow him to give himself a proper introduction.
Hey, John. Hey, everyone in the Ecom Dropshipping Wolves group. Very, very glad to be here. My name is Dayu. I run EcommOps. We are a premium sourcing, fulfillment, and overall supply chain service working out of China. We work with hundreds of clients, 7, 8 figures and beyond. And we really specialize in helping e-commerce stores that might have started out as traditional dropshipping, but really moving to the next level and trying to create a supply chain to help them actually enable their scaling so that they're not held back by the back-end supply chain. Because at the end of the day, if you're in e-commerce, there's the marketing side, but it is a form of retail as well. So the products, the supply chain, the logistics is also super important if you really want to hit those high numbers. So yeah, so that's a bit about me. Really happy to be here. Really happy to share any thoughts in this group as well. So anyone in the group, feel free to just come with any questions you have about drop shipping, fulfillment in general, shipping issues, especially going into this Q4.
So real quick, before we get into your story, I got a list of questions here just to kind of out of my own curiosity, but I'm sure everyone in the group will appreciate them as well. You work with some pretty big names too. After we started working together, I was referred to you by my buddy Mark, who I met through Alex Fedidov's, actually from a mastermind before I then joined Alex Fedidov's group. And I also realized after we started working together that you work with Jordan, some of the other big, Jordan Welsh, is it? Some of the bigger e-com, I guess, influencers, right?
Yeah. So yeah, we do. We work with Jordan Welsh. We work with Gabriel St. Germain as well, one of the OGs of YouTubers in e-commerce. We're starting some projects with Alex Fedidov, and yes, some of the biggest players in the game. But yes, we're happy to work with them, and I think that once you get to that scale, once you get success, maybe just starting out with dropshipping, if you really want to move to that next level, move to the level of these guys, this is where you really wanted to be thinking about your supply chain in a different way.
And you got an interesting story. So you actually started with your own product, which landed you on Shark Tank, right?
Oh, yes. Actually, this little dude right here, his name is Cody. It is a storytelling device for kids, fully custom products. Started this I think we started 3 or 4 years back. This was something that is like the complete opposite of dropshipping. Like we had $500,000 of investment funds to get through the product development, create the first batch of units. And it's, so this product eventually went on Shark Tank. We walked away with a deal. So this product is doing well. But for a while, actually, it was actually, when we first started out, it was quite tough. It was actually not really making me any money at all or my partners any money at all. And that's actually how I found out about dropshipping, because I was trying to figure out, watching YouTube videos, how to actually market this thing, right? And that was when I found out about Gabriel and these kids supposedly making like $1 million, right? I'm not sure how I trust a lot of YouTubers out there, but still, I was like, wow, this is so much easier. Dropshipping is so much easier than trying to create a custom product from scratch. So that's how I actually myself, as kind of just a side stream of income, started some of my own dropshipping stores. So I actually started years back, kind of where a lot of you folks are as well. And I started scaling up some stores, a couple $1,000s per day. So doing quite well. But then I actually realized the reason why I started EcommOps is because at that time, I was just using AliExpress, finding good AliExpress sellers. And I realized that, hey, this is not scalable. I mean, just given my own supply chain experience, I realized this is not a real supply chain. Just traditional drop shipping, you can't really scale that safely, and I had some issues as well. And I had a lot of friends in the industry, and I would just constantly hear about issues where as they scale up, especially a period like Q4, everything breaks down, right? Huge delays, like their agent or their sellers just, wouldn't tell them the truth, sending fake tracking numbers and things like that. And literally like entire businesses were just killed because of that, right? Or some of our clients, I mean, they well, not our clients, but some of the folks, they would just lose all the profits they gain because of all the refunds they get after Christmas because they didn't deliver on time. So that was actually why I started EcommOps, because I realized the state of the dropshipping backend, which includes AliExpress sellers, which includes most of the other smaller agents out there, which by the way, they mostly started as AliExpress sellers anyways. They might still be AliExpress sellers actually. And I realized that there is a huge need for something that is a little bit more different, a little bit more advanced, that actually helps successful folks scale into a much more sustainable business. And just from my experience, I personally stopped dropshipping myself because I felt like I'm a lot more interested and have a lot more expertise on the operation and supply chain. So that's where I started EcommOps. And I remember when I actually started EcommOps, all I had was like a PDF, and I was like sending off to people in like various groups. And we just gained a ton of traction because the value proposition makes a lot of sense. And, that was a couple of years back. And since then, I mean, now I think we're fulfilling something like 10,000 orders per day and growing every day because of Q4. So yeah, we really just built something that actually works a little bit differently than anything that existed out there. And our goal is that, I think that this e-commerce industry has such a high potential to make a lot of people a lot of money and sustainable revenue as well. And I think that, a lot of guys, including you, by the way, with what you do here in terms of managing, kind of Facebook issues, there's a lot of folks pushing the envelope, doing innovative things on the front end side, whether it's marketing or, how to deal with Facebook. However, there was always a gap on the back end side. So basically, it is our mission to continue to push on that front as well to help support the really great guys in this industry who work their asses off to make things work, who probably care about their brand, care about the customers. And, we basically are on the forefront of doing that, but on the back end side.
Now, what was so you're fluent in Chinese. So what was your experience like, just out of curiosity, when you started dropshipping? And I'm assuming you would communicate in Chinese, maybe you get better prices, better communication overall. What problems did you see that someone like that's a native English speaker and is communicating? A lot of the Chinese speak English that work with us. Mm-hmm. What are some things that they're maybe not sharing or not making it aware of for me as like an English speaking dropshipper that I have no idea of?
Yeah. So actually, so a couple of things. First, kind of one of the low hanging fruits is that you have to realize that if you're actually working with especially like AliExpress sellers or, some smaller agents who don't have a great grasp of English, they're most likely using translation devices or translation software, like something like Google Translate, but the Chinese version of it, which means that some of the stuff that you're actually saying could literally be lost in translation. And we saw that a lot before. When you're not a natural English speaker, which a lot of these sellers weren't, and they're using translation tools, if you speak using too complicated words, if you speak using slang, if you have like misspellings that are very obvious that it's a misspelling, all that stuff could just be mistranslated. So that is actually part of the communications barrier that I think that everyone should be aware of, right? Use simple words, right? Don't use complicated sentences. Just be like, okay, where's my order at, right? Just use very, very simple, straightforward words. Don't use slang. And I think that's actually going to start to solve a certain big portion of the communications issues, because there's that translation gap that you don't even know if they understand what you're saying. The other bigger inherent thing though about it's more about the Chinese business culture, to be honest. And I know this very well because I worked in China before. The Chinese business culture tends to be very, in a way, it's not transparent, but it doesn't necessarily come from a negative place. They're not necessarily trying to lie to you. There is this tendency to feel like, okay, I don't want to make my client unhappy, right? Obviously, like they don't want to make their client unhappy. They also don't want to lose the client as well. So the tendency usually is that, okay, shoot, there is an issue, right? We're out of stock. Like, what do I do, right? Well, they might know it's going to take 5 more days to get stock, but they'd be like, look, maybe we just upload the tracking numbers, tell them, don't worry, it's going to send out soon, like, don't worry, and then send it out later, right? I mean, technically speaking, look, from a Western mindset, that is not right? But you have to understand, from their mindset, they're not really trying to lie to you. It's really just part of the culture to be a little bit more subtle or very subtle in their communications and not necessarily telling you the full truth without lying to you. Now, obviously, if someone literally tells you it's been sent out and actually gets sent out 5 days later, that's, literally lying, right? But I think a lot of the times it's more of just not sharing the full truth. Now, this is obviously something that I found to be a problem as well. Like, not that I don't think that they're not thinking about it the right way, because it's a cultural difference, but that's also one of the biggest things that I push our team, how we run EcommOps. And actually, one of the suggestions that I have for everyone here who's not working with someone like us is that level of transparency many times goes both ways as well, because like you have to just force your agent to be transparent with you and like kind of ask the right questions as well. Like, you have to understand that, for example, like, as you're scaling up, stock is going to be an issue. Nothing just magically happens, right? Stuff doesn't magically get produced, right? So you have to understand what the right questions to ask are. Do you have stock available? Like, how many units do you have available? Ask very direct questions. And obviously then if they lie to you, then that's a problem. You should probably find someone else, right? And then the other part of that is be okay if they are transparent with you and like they made a mistake and they're transparent with you. I think especially I see a lot of new dropshippers, sometimes their sellers are actually honest with them, right? Hey, we are out of stock. It's going to take 5 days. And they just, like, the dropshippers get pissed off. Like, oh, like why? I don't understand.
Well, I think a lot of that's nothing against the dropshipping culture. I mean, I've been in it for myself for three plus years. I think a lot of people come in 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, expecting things to basically be like solved that day. And it's just not realistic sometimes, Yeah, exactly. Hey, look, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault at all, but I'm just saying that if you want a smoother relationship with your seller, with your agent, make sure that you make them understand that it's okay, that they're actually transparent with what's going on, right? Make sure that they don't have this maybe unreasonable fear that if they actually tell you the truth, you're going to stop working with them, right? So I think that's the biggest tips in terms of that. And the other thing I think is just overall business process, especially AliExpress sellers and smaller agents as well, is that if you actually think about the concept of fulfillment, it's actually quite simple if you really think. I mean, like I can train anyone here to actually fulfill orders within like a couple hours, basically. I mean, that's what we do with our staff essentially, right? You order goods and you pack it and you ship it out, right? But the problem is that it's a physical process and it doesn't scale very well. Every one person has only a limited amount of time, only a limited number of packages they can actually fulfill in QC per day. So I think that's also the downside of working with some of these smaller agents and sellers, is that once you start scaling, you're going to just overreach, what they can possibly do. And they don't think about things in terms of building a whole business process. So one other tip here as well is that as you start to scale, I mean, look, when you're testing out, like, using AliExpress sellers, using smaller is totally fine. Like, they have no MOQ, whatever. So you can just test as flexibly as possible. But once you scale up, you really got to look for someone who actually has a business, right? Who actually has a structure to it, who has warehouses, who can expand their capacity. And, this is like, I think that stuff like AliExpress has a place. CJ dropshipping has a place, right? They're great for testing. But then once you test, you want to double down on that product, on that brand, and really scale up, with someone who knows what they're doing. So this brings me to us, right? So something you really opened my eyes to was, I always had an idea of, okay, maybe the suppliers I worked with in the past, maybe they didn't really have stock when they said they did, like, and it makes sense, like with the cultural differences, like you're mentioning, because that's a real thing, you know. But you kind of checked me. You're like, no, dude, like you got to stock this up if you want it actually to be fulfilled the way you say you want it, right? So I think that's something that, like, that education piece would really serve dropshippers like myself, short term and long term, whether they work with you or not. I think it's just something that we need to educate ourselves on, is expectations. And stocking up is a normal business practice. Like, you take any major brand, they don't actually drop ship out of China and never touch inventory, right? Like, they're typically at least doing bulk orders to a fulfillment warehouse, and then they're fulfilling from there, I'm assuming, with my limited knowledge of the fulfillment process. But maybe you could just kind of give some red flags on, let's say someone is working with the agent right now. What are some red flags that you see consistently? Kind of like what we're talking about with a lot of yeses, but then there's actually inconsistencies in fulfillment time. Like, what are some, like, the top 2 or 3 red flags you would say if someone is working with an agent currently or is trying to find an agent?
Yeah. So I think that one big red flag is honestly like agents who say that they can promise like a certain number of processing days with no MOQ at all, right? Because no MOQ basically means like not really pre-stocking, right? Like, you know, where they say something like, oh, you know, flexible with your orders, you know, doesn't really matter, you know, we'll fulfill it, right? And they also say that there is like 24-hour processing time. That just doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, if they do say, and you know, that's a very common thing these days. Actually, if you guys see in various groups, I'm sure if you ask for an agent, you're gonna have like 10 agents who say no MOQ, like fast shipping, you know, like 5 to 10 days, whatever, right? That is a huge red flag, because it either shows that they don't know what they're doing, because that's impossible, or it shows that they're just, you know, clearly just being dishonest about the fact that they don't have to stock at all and can still send out fast. Right. And I think that the other thing is, well, one of the things that you actually want to do, and this is actually like after you start talking with the agents, is that you actually want to make sure that they're in the right location to be efficient for this kind of work. So the 2 best locations are going to be, the best one is going to be in the Shenzhen area. This is where most of the logistics, like Unexpress, 4PX, they're where they're headquartered, and they have by far the fastest, efficient shipping options because they go through Hong Kong, and you know, that's where you get the fast Unexpress speeds that you actually hear about. The other option is going to be in the Shanghai area. That includes Yiwu as well. That area has a ton of drop shipping product factories. So those are, you know, if you're based there, then you can actually source products very quickly, although shipping is a little bit slower because the fast lines still go through Hong Kong. So those 2 areas are the ones that I recommend. There's kind of a trade-off, right? Like slightly faster product sourcing versus slightly faster shipping, right? Now, anywhere else they're based, except for like those general regions and kind of maybe like the cities around them, there's no reason to be there. I mean, there's absolutely no reason to be there for efficiency purposes. They're there because, like, I don't know, like they live there, or the rent there is a lot cheaper, right? It's gonna be a lot cheaper for them to operate out there. And potentially that means that they can actually offer you somewhat cheaper costs as well. However, like, you're doing an expense, like huge efficiency, right? I mean, like it's going to take longer to source stuff. It's going to take longer, like, you know, 2 to 5 days, sometimes longer, even if they send out via the same line using Unexpress, for example, right? And kind of related to that, you know, their thing is be careful when someone is telling you, I'm going to give you the cheapest price possible, right? I'm going to outbid everyone else. I'm going to be way cheaper than AliExpress. You know, I'm going to beat their price by 5 cents, whatever, right? Because first of all, and it's exactly that. Like, realistically, this is a very low margin business, which means that the actual like cost difference you're going to see is going to be like so low. It's going to be like 5 cents or 10 cents or something like that, right? But the thing is, like, because it's such a low margin business, that difference is huge for the actual agent. And when they have very low margins, they can't do stuff like expand on capacity. They can't do stuff like hiring more people when they outpace what they can actually do, right? So you got to be careful with that. And there's also the other aspect of when you think about products, like any kind of hot selling products probably has like tens of factories, maybe 100 factories sometimes, right? Which means that there's a huge variance in the product quality as well, even if it looks exactly the same. And obviously that has slight cost implications as well. So by working with the absolute cheapest option, you're going to face a situation where they're not resourcing correctly. They might be just cutting corners by going with the cheaper options, which might not be obvious with pictures, but especially, for example, if it's electronic product, you might face issues after the fact. Or if it's something like a fabric product, maybe the fabric is actually lower quality than what the actual picture looks like. Or actually, John, we actually went through this for one of your products, actually, yeah. So okay. I won't talk about what it is, but there were different versions of the product. And you're working with, some of the lower quality versions, and we actually had a discussion about that as well.
He gave me a reality check, but it meant a lot to me because I'd worked with several suppliers before, and no one had been that honest, right? So I think that what he's saying is so true. If you want to think long term with this business, or if you want to like just make money like at scale in the short term, you may save a couple bucks by going with like a cheaper yes man, we'll just call it like it is. But the trade-off is going to be when it comes to the fulfillment side of it, you're going to have a mess you're going to have to clean up. Your margin's going to maybe get cut in half between chargebacks, refunds, headaches. It's going to cost you more paying your team to service all that mess, right? So, one thing that I actually really opened my eyes up to, because I was setting up stores in different EU markets, like one for Germany in German, one for Sweden in Swedish, right? And then I have my US store in English. And I was assuming, because of my experience with past suppliers I work with, that it was basically like one price flat for the first unit outside the US, one price flat inside the US, right? And then he showed me like the variance in cost, and it was actually him trying to do like proper due diligence with helping me and just being honest and transparent with me, because it's going to cost different, right? And I actually just got notifications on products we had asked for quotes for maybe 2 months ago. His team has given me, with the increasing costs, which we could talk about after this, his team has proactively reached out to give us updates on the quotes because of the changes. He's not just going to like eat his margin more just to get the win and then have issues because there's no margin left after and then have to hit us later. He's telling me up front, like, hey, this is the reality because of all these issues with backlogs at ports and all this mess that everyone's going through. Here's what you're going to be facing. We need to let you know this. Like, dude, no one else does that. I don't get messages from other guys that I've worked with them in the past. Never before, never today. So thank you for that, man.
Oh, I appreciate that. I mean, it's all about transparency. And I think that, as you alluded to, like different countries, different shipping lines have very, very different prices. And, I guess I didn't mention this, but it is not great for you to just get like a US price and like a non-US price. And also not actually knowing exactly what they're sending, using, right? Even if they say something, okay, most people here probably know about Unexpress. Even if they say that they're sending via Unexpress, there's like 5 different Unexpress services, by the way. There's 3 that we use. There's like 2 other crap ones that we actually don't even use, right? So a lot of agents say, okay, we use Unexpress, it's the best, right? And then they just quote you one price, and then especially when there might be pricing changes. I mean, this happened a lot like last year when COVID price increases were a lot. We saw a lot of situations where agents would just downgrade the shipping service because it was getting too expensive to ship using the regular Unexpress services. And especially back in especially during times like back in the COVID issues and also Q4 as well. Like, that makes no sense because these are times that you want to try to get faster, right? Like that there are natural delays happening now, and you don't want your agent to not tell you about any price increases, but they can't run without margin. So if they don't actually change your prices and they start changing your shipping options, your shipping just gets slower and slower and slower. And that's what screws a lot of people. And again, this kind of maybe goes back to this concept, this business culture of like, okay, I don't want to like, harm this relationship. This price is actually doable if we actually just use this slightly cheaper and we think it's still okay kind of line, right? So let's just do it. And then the client doesn't have to pay more. And I think everyone wins, right?
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that also is important to realize, by the way, is the vast majority of AliExpress sellers or agents, they see things from only their point of view, right? It's also because of the nature of this traditional dropshipping model. They think their responsibility is to get the products and ship it out and tell you kind of like roughly how long it's going to take, right? First of all, as I'm sure a lot of you have experienced, when they tell you shipping dates, it's more common that it's inaccurate than not, because they tend to actually use like the average or cherry pick some tracking numbers, right? Which we definitely don't do. So you got to be aware, what the actual shipping range actually is, right? And then the other thing that you want to be aware of is, I just lost my train of thought for a bit. And then you also want to be very aware of like what the shipping lines are actually going to be, right? But then the gap in the knowledge is that they have no marketing experience. I mean, they've never ran a brand before. They're pure suppliers, so they don't have that grasp in their mind of how important it is to ship as fast as possible, how important it is to make sure the quality is on par, because I'm sure they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to refund you or resend you on all these issues. I'm going to deal with it after the fact, right? I don't want to deal with the factory. I don't want to try to improve the product because in their mind, that makes sense. I'm fulfilling my responsibility, right? But on your end, you get 5% defects. You get like 5% refunds, but you have to refund on the whole sales price. You might get a refund on your COGS price, right? So at the end, you still make a loss. You're going to kill your Facebook feedback scores, right? But they don't get that. They don't understand that this is actually important. That you as a client, that you as a dropshipper, you as a store owner has to care about your customers as well, right? So I think that's also a big gap as well. That I think that it's just hard for a typical supplier to really get, because I mean that's not what they do. They don't have experience actually marketing products to the US, for example, and probably you don't want them to, because you definitely don't want to work with a supplier who's also running their own Shopify stores and putting your product in their stores, right?
So for someone that is scaling up with, let's say you got a one product store that's starting to really take off. Now, at what point does stocking up make complete sense, right? Is that something like let's say someone is testing with AliExpress, it's doing well, they see the potential, high conversion rate, big margin, all of the works, right? It's a winner. Let's say they reach out to you, someone like you, and they're like, hey, here's what I've got. What's the quote? Okay, great. Price makes sense. Like, is stocking up right away make sense? And if so, what tips do you have around that?
Yeah, so I think that it's going to depend a lot on your experience and confidence in your marketing to actually scale it up, right? I'll kind of give you an example. Like if you're completely new and this is the very first product that you ever had success with, and your ROAS is pretty good, but it's kind of just barely there, you probably want to run it for a little bit longer. Like say like running it at, try to scale it up to like maybe 20, 30 orders per day at least, for like a week or so, and make sure that your ROAS is as high as possible. And, then it's going to be most likely more scalable, right? That's when you probably want to find an agent who can help you scale it up more, or at least maintain that order volume. The reason I say that is because I'm sure that a lot of you, even more experienced folks have experienced this before. You might have a winner that, by definition, a winner, maybe it's just not unprofitable, right? It's above break even. And you try to scale it up, but it just doesn't really get anywhere, right? And it just dies down after a week or so. And for your sake as well, it's probably sensible to maybe just move on to something else. Or, I mean, if you're super experienced, you want to build some crazy new funnels, maybe like you have the ability to do that as well. Because if you're doing if that is the case, then it doesn't really make sense for you to kind of work with someone like us to hold inventory, buy some units in advance, because you still don't have full confidence it's actually going to continue the trend. And it's also going to be maybe a distraction for you where you can be testing something else, right? Now, on the other hand, if you are super experienced, right? If you like scale tens or maybe hundreds of products before, this is where I actually think that if you have that instinct to feel like, okay, even if I hit 5 orders per day, in the first 3 days, ROAS is 4x, your break even is 1.5, and you just have that feeling that I've seen this before, 90% of the time, if something like this happens, I can scale it to hundreds per day, right? Thousands per day maybe, right? Then if that is the case, and you have that confidence, and it's more about your confidence as well, then I think it's the right time to talk to an agent. And, if you talk to someone like us, we actually know all these numbers. So, if you talk to maybe someone who doesn't have that experience, they might be like, oh, 5 orders per day, that's not that much, whatever, right? But then if you come and tell us hey, look, I just started this new product, 4x ROAS, break even is 1.5. We're going to get that. Okay, yeah, that sounds great. I don't even care what your order volume is, as long as you're selling something. Let's figure out how to get you started, because that just sounds like you're getting held back by a supply chain before you want to scale up hard. Right. So it really depends on the product itself. But, the only thing is that as a business owner, a big part of it is your own confidence level, and that comes with experience, right? And the second thing is your risk appetite as well, right? Because there's going to be a little bit more risk, not a huge risk, but a little bit more risk to kind of pre-stock in advance, have upfront payments, right? But the combination of how confident you feel about an early product success versus that risk, it's your equation to make. But I would say that general rule of thumb, as early as you feel confident that you want to push it hard is the right time to talk to someone like us.
So let's say someone is building that confidence, because I know what that switch is like, going from this perfect world of you pay after fulfillment. It's the best thing ever, but it's not sustainable at scale. Typically it's not sustainable at scale. So what someone that is right on the edge, that's having those early wins, but they're having the back end fulfillment issues at scale, where just to give them perspective, let's say they worked with you, right? And they hit that 20, 30 orders a day. They know it's time to pull the trigger. What realistically, what's the frequency? Let's say they don't scale up aggressively, going from 5K a day to 50K a day, but maybe they want to push with better fulfillment at 7 to 10K a day. What would their frequency of stocking up be? And what would their, obviously depends on their product cost of goods, but roughly how much are they going to be actually pre-purchasing in advance? So they kind of get an idea of cash flow and the confidence with it.
Oh, yes. So this is where we're going to have, we have a team that works with folks, and if you don't work with us, also try to get this from your own supplier as well. It's as we think about it, we want to minimize the risk for our clients as well, right? We're not going to tell you, hey, pay us $50,000 up front to stock up on 4,000 units, whatever, when you only have 20 orders per day, right? What we do is that we talk with the factories directly, right? We actually get on the phone with them, by the way. We don't just, text them or, email them, whatever. We get on the phone with them. We ask the very important question of, what is your factory capacity? What is the amount that you can actually send, okay? And what is also the lead time, the expected lead time as well. And then how we then pre-stock for our clients. Let's talk about normal periods first, because something like Q4 is a little bit different, right? During normal periods, we're going to de-risk as much as possible for you. And we're going to say, hey, if you trust us, then just let us do our thing and use our models to say that, okay, let's just say the lead time is 3 days. All right. And you are selling 50 orders per day. it's probably reasonable for us to maybe pre-stock like 5 days of inventory at any one time, so that like it's always ahead of the lead time. And then worst case, if you suddenly stop, you're gonna have just a couple days of extra inventory, right? That you can probably just sell off organically, to be honest. We'll figure out some way to sell it, right? So 5 times like 50, for example, that might be 250 every single time, and that's going to keep up. And as long as we have that agreement, then we are going to just continuously, like, it's going to seem automated for you, but we obviously have a team doing that, right? So we're going to just continue to try to keep up. And then we also adapt with your order volumes as well. But this is actually where it's actually super important for you to communicate with your supplier if they're doing that pre-stocking. Don't forget that your supplier is going to see your orders as they come in, which is after you adjust your marketing spend if you scale up, right? So say in that case, one day, like, your stuff blows up, you want to scale up huge. You put together some massive CBO campaigns and you go from 50 to 200 orders the next day. Well, that's immediately all your stock. And then and it's like, if you do that, then honestly, like, your supplier, like, literally they can't predict what is going to happen in the future, right? So this is actually where we ask, you should be also telling your supplier as well, like, hey, look, I am going to push the ads. So right now it's 50 orders per day. Like, let's expect that it's going to go up. Now, obviously, you're never going to know like how effective your marketing campaign is going to be, but just at least communicate, right? So at least your supplier has a know in advance, and then they'll start talking with factories in advance, right? Now, the other situation though is something like Q4, like Black Friday sales, for example, like preparing for Christmas delivery, for example, or any maybe kind of holiday sales like Valentine's Day, for example, right? This is where you might want to take a little bit more risk in terms of like, I don't really know no one's going to know what their Black Friday campaign is going to do exactly this year, right? However, you probably want your Black Friday sales to get delivered in time for Christmas, right? You probably want to be able to say that this is guaranteed for Christmas delivery. And you're actually plenty safe. For pretty much all countries, you can ship out by the end of November with no problem. And for a lot of countries, you can actually ship out by the first week of December, no problem to deliver in time for Christmas. But that's if you have stock, right? It also doesn't work if you have a massive Black Friday sale and you sell like 10,000 pieces of something and like, whoa, guys, like, you didn't tell me the factory can only produce 1,000 units per day. So it's going to take 10 days to even get this produced, which means that you're going to miss Christmas delivery on a whole batch of goods. So this is where going into something like Black Friday, which is obviously coming up, this is where you might want to take more risk and say, hey, look, I don't know what it's going to do, but let's just maybe just order 1,000 units in advance to support those sales. You might also want to, like, if you might want to, like, be more cautious with your marketing so you don't oversell that as well, right? Now, this is obviously a little bit more for the experienced folks who might have gone through like a Black Friday sale already, who kind of has an idea of how to manage that correctly. But if you are experienced, if you have a great confidence in your product for this Black Friday or any holidays, then by not doing something like this, you're going to face two huge issues, right? Either you're going to deliver late, which is going to cause a lot of issues, obviously, right? Or you're going to leave money on the table. Like, if you say, shoot, like, this is way too much, like, there's no way that like I can deliver this on time, and you may make the responsible decision to dial down or shut down your campaigns. Well, maybe you could have made 6 figures more on Cyber Monday, for example, but you couldn't do it because you knew you had no stock, right? So in these cases, this is where you might want to be more thoughtful about how much risk you want to take. And you might want to talk to your supplier about maybe just preparing a batch in advance of some kind of sale like Black Friday, where delivery time is very sensitive.
Not to encourage super risky behavior by 5xing your ad spend when things are fire, which happens, right? Like, I think if we've all experienced it, having a relationship and working with someone like you in advance, where you're having those lead times managed, you're already doing pre-stock as you do more of a gradual scale, having that existing relationship, having the product, already through your supply chain, and then seeing that 4x, 5x jump, like as an opportunity. And let's say you pull the trigger on it as the advertiser, as the dropshipper, having that existing relationship with you already is going to give you the best chance at actually fulfilling on the promise of delivering quality product and as fast. But there's obviously going to be a gap, because unless there's just a ton of stock of some product and you just get lucky, because sometimes you get lucky, right? But this is another value add of having a transparent relationship with someone like Ayu, because if he's already handling your supply chain as a whole, which is really what he offers, you roll the dice with that, it's going to give you the best opportunity versus like the one-off guy off of AliExpress you've been doing 20, 30 orders a day with. When you jump to 200 orders a day, it's a big gamble and a toss up. You may get a lot of yeses and not an actual, you might be looking at 2 months right before Chinese New Year before it actually hits their door, right? So,
yeah. I mean, the other thing on that point as well is that, look, I as a business owner, when you're scaling up to that level, 7 figures and beyond, building a more sustainable business, like you got to think about it as real business, right? So part of that means that you have to consider your supply chain, which is actually quite literally half of your business. I mean, it's not exactly, but it's half of any retail operations. And once you get to that point, what you also don't want to do is have just always thinking, feeling in your gut that something might go wrong at any one point. I mean, that's a distraction. That's a distraction on your energy. You don't want once in a while, like always have to be like, checking all your orders to make sure they're actually going out on time. I mean, that's just like a waste of your time and energy that you could be spent on, well, a lot better things. I'm sure there's a lot more valuable things you should be spending your time in terms of actually scaling up this product as well. But again, don't forget to tell your agent your plans. Tell your agent your plans. Don't forget that there's someone actually working on the back end. It's not all just magic.
I think when we had our very first call, I think I told you a story that happened from 2019 Q4. I was consistently working with one supplier. I'm not going to drop their name in here, doing probably about 150K a month consistently in fulfillment, in revenue, right? And we scaled up one product on Christmas Day in this like 10-day stretch. We were hitting 30 to 50K a day, going from 5 to 10K a day. And then suddenly, 5 days into that scale, when we're having all this cash come in, they tell us, hey, John, there's been a big thing that happened. You need a pre-stock. And no, this is a 2-year relationship where we had been paying at point of fulfillment, right? According to what they were telling me was fulfillment. Suddenly, when we were at the peak of our scale, they were like, hey, by the way, we need you to wire us like 50 grand right now to pre-stock because factories are closing. And I was like, hold on, dude, you can't flip this on me right now after we've been working together for 2 years. Because definitely, I mean, you could probably give us better insight to that. But my assumption is that there was nothing there in the factory. There was no stock available. They needed a rush order and maybe pay a premium to the factory to actually produce it. I pushed back. I actually moved suppliers that day, which was another disaster in itself. And that didn't really solve the problem, but it was more of a trust thing for me at that point. 2 days later, those same guys came back to me, who I will not drop their name. And they were like, hey, don't worry. We'll take care of it for you. Like suddenly it wasn't a problem when it was 2 days before. So yeah, like I've never had anything like that with Ayu. He's just been super straight with me up front, which I think is what a lot of us need, especially that are more experienced, right? So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, man.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, it sounds like, hey, I would say that they had some level of responsibility because I'm sure what happened was that they just realized that, okay, like the lead times were getting so long that shit was going to get screwed if they can't pre-stock, So at the very least, I think credit on them. I think they probably realized that this was not working anymore for this one product. But no, I mean, I do agree. I think that it's, look, there are actually some situations where we know the product is just so available. We can get it within 24 hours, right? Where we can actually say that, hey, like, I mean, not going to drop any product names, but like, like a lot of like, beauty electronics, for example, they were booming last year, but they have overcapacity this year, for example, because of, COVID last year. And now, people actually can go to beauty salons. So in some cases, like, we're actually going to tell you like, hey, yeah, actually, we can get stock in 24 hours. The factory is trying to push us more stock. So no worries about lead time. Then we don't actually need a pre-stock. Right. So that there's going to be cases like that as well. But the key is to have that conversation. Right. And we're never going to ask for, I mean, you shouldn't work with a supplier who's going to try to just always ask you to pre-stock a certain amount, just because, right? There has to be a good reason for it. And again, you want to de-risk as well. And we want to help you de-risk as well. But at the end of the day, like, especially if you're kind of comparing with more traditional, like retail fulfillment, like sending on a boat for like 40 days to the US, for example, US fulfillment, you're still going to be facing a ton less risk from China fulfillment because the ability to get stuff so fast, right? It doesn't take 40 days, it takes like 3 days, right? But yeah, on that point is why I think that, this is specifically, I think for your audience, you guys have been focusing a lot on Facebook ad accounts, making sure that you don't get restricted. First of all, I will tell everyone, just even from our own client experiences, you could be doing everything right and still get restricted. All right. So it's not you, it's Facebook, right? So that part of it, obviously, John has been great in helping you guys figure out solutions. However, the underlying piece of it is also really important, is your Facebook feedback score. A lot of people have been asking me, I mean, not my clients, but like, just like I've seen a lot of questions about, okay, how do I fix my feedback score? Do you guys have any services, right? Can we get like, the review services? And I know those exist, right? I'm not saying that they don't have a place. However, the best way to fix your feedback score is actually keep it high, all right? And there tends to be a misconception that just because you fulfill from China, you're going to get a low feedback score, and you have to swap to like US fulfillment, local fulfillment to get, 4 or above. That's simply not true. We have clients who get like 4.9, 5, on average, our clients get 4 or higher, which is, obviously amazing. I mean, you technically only really need, above 2 or 3 or so, right? And this is because, well, a couple of things, right? First of all, if you're not doing this already, definitely set your shipping expectations within Facebook to like not like 2 weeks, like set it like 6 weeks, whatever, right? So they don't get the survey quite as fast. I know that might be changing a little bit, but set the expectations in your Facebook account and work to source great products, right? Use faster shipping lines. I mean, to the US right now, our express line, you'll get there in 5 to 10 calendar days. I mean, not business days, calendar days. I mean, even if you're using something like ShipOff, for example, their standard line, they say it takes 3 to 7 business days, right? So if you do the math, it's honestly like even very similar to shipping directly from China. So you use the right shipping methods, you make sure that your agent pre-stocks and processes, and just make sure that you set the right expectations with your customers. It's totally like, look, if you have if you have great marketing and a unique product and brand, it's totally fine to say that, hey, expected delivery is 1 to 2 weeks, for example, right? And then if you do all of that, like, yeah, we have so many clients who have, 4.5 or above, a couple of 4.9s, a couple of 5s as well. And that makes a huge difference, by the way, in your Facebook account. I guess it's not completely proven, but I think that there is a theory that, higher feedback score actually does help out your ad performance. But at the very least, you're not worrying about like being restricted because of your lower feedback score, right? And the other thing that I want to say there is that, like, when you think about the feedback score, look, you're running a business, right? Your focus should also be your customers and your customer experience. Your feedback score actually is not just some random number that Facebook puts together to screw you, right? Your feedback score is actually a direct reflection of like what your customer's experience is. So if your feedback score is low, then you're probably also doing something wrong. I mean, excuse me for being blunt, you're probably doing something wrong as well, right? The other thing that you might want to actually do to address that is, I think that one common misconception is that if you're working with China products, fulfilled from China, you don't have any control over the product itself. Now, obviously, like there is this next step of, okay, you want to customize the product, like create something, Gen 2 of a generic product, for example. That is a next step, and that's something that everyone should consider if you're doubling down on a very winning product. However, even a step before that, right? If you have quality issues and you see patterns in the quality issues, right? Don't just assume that it's not solvable. Like I think a lot of people assume that, I'm just gonna get a refund from my seller, but just constantly you're always getting a certain percentage of these issues. And you feel like unless I spend a lot of money, I can't really solve this, right? That is completely not true. I will tell you that good factories in China, they're proud of their work. They don't want to send out crap, right? A lot of times this happens is because they don't get that feedback from their clients, who are the suppliers, and their suppliers don't get that feedback from the Shopify store owners, right? Because it's common, just, okay, I'm going to refund you. That's it, right? What you actually want to do is when you see some patterns in the issue, work with your supplier to figure out how to resolve that. If they tell you that they're not willing to do it, then you should probably find someone else, right? But the thing is, like, your supplier, what we do is that, okay, look, 5% of the product has this exact same issue. This is not an improvement we're doing here. This is a quality issue. So let's figure out how to solve it. Otherwise, we're not giving you orders anymore. We're going to find some other factory, right? And again, these factories, they actually want to solve these issues. Like if they're obvious, and the issues might be as simple as adjusting their QC process a little bit, right? Changing one slight component. And a lot of times, like, they can even do it for free, right? Or we force them to do it for free, or else we lose the order. So, definitely don't just assume. There's two things you don't want to assume, right? One is that shipping times are not as long as you think if you do the right things. And then two, if you have product quality issues that's hurting your feedback score, like, do something about it, figure out how to do something about it. And basically, if you get both those solved, like, there's literally no reason. There's no reason why you can't get a 4 or higher feedback score.
It's happening. Your clients are doing it. So
yeah, exactly.
One, I know you got to run soon. It's been almost an hour. It's been fun, man. I've learned a lot. Question. This is a big question I get. VAT. Can you give us some insight into how your clients are managing VAT best? Because I know that's been killing guys' margins in the EU. Yeah.
So the EU VAT changes, and that was actually a huge thing coming in July. Quick summary. The VAT started getting charged on the point of sales on your retail value as opposed to the input value, right? So technically speaking, if you want to do everything completely right, you're supposed to actually pay that or collect that and then pay it on your full retail price. So there are a lot of suppliers out there who, this is the wrong way to handle it first, right? There's gonna be some suppliers out there who tell you that they can pay for the VAT on their COGS, which is something that's possible. Or they say that, oh, don't worry about it. You can send it VAT free, right? They represent it as if that's going to solve all your problems, your own legal tax obligations. But that is completely not true. That is the way. There's a lot of clever ways to actually get through customs. All right. But that doesn't solve your own legal obligation. Now, obviously, you can then make a choice. Do I care about this, right? Do I just want to fly under the radar? Some people make that choice, but that's your responsibility and that's your decision. But do not trust anyone who tells you that they can solve your VAT problem without you doing anything about it, all right? Now, if you want to do something about it, there are a couple of rather legitimate ways that you can actually handle it. One legitimate way is that you can actually build multiple company structures outside of the EU. So for example, Hong Kong is a popular one. Now, this is going to be a public thing, so I'm not going to go into the exact details of how that all works. But essentially, the way that the EU VAT works is that the EU VAT is supposed to be a EU VAT, like literally EU VAT. So technically speaking, stuff that's happening outside of the EU should be able to be deducted from the VAT calculation before it actually goes into the EU. So stuff from like direct from China shipping, for example, other fees, for example, there's other fees is kind of like that little gray area loophole that you can kind of figure out some way to manage, right? And doing it that way, there's actually a legitimate way for you to actually reduce your VAT burden completely legally. Now, again, I can't go into too many details there, obviously. But yeah, so that's going to be the key thing if you want to do it legit. And I think the other thing as well is you're going to have a little bit of leeway as well, even if you want to be legitimate in the future, right? So if you're kind of just starting out really small and you're just testing out, like, I don't know how much you need to worry about your VAT, or even say that, hey, I just pay the VAT directly, but I know that if I figure out like a long-term solution, that's going to be reduced and adds to your margins anyways, right? Because like kind of creating different business structures, like there's fixed costs involved to it. I don't think I recommend it unless you're, probably doing like 6+ figures and looking to scale up already, because it probably doesn't actually make sense, right? And then the other thing that what you could probably start doing right now is, as I mentioned, that is a EU thing. Technically speaking, if you're actually shipping from outside the EU, that portion is not actually VAT inclusive. I mean, it shouldn't be counted in your VAT calculation. So the rule though is that you can actually break down the shipping cost from your retail price and then charge that on your retail, but you have to put that in your invoice. So for example, your email that you send to your customers, right? Now, in this way, actually, you don't even have to say something like, oh, the customer pays actual shipping, right? You could just say, hey, this product is $30, VAT and shipping inclusive, right? And then on the customer invoice you send them, you say, okay, maybe the product value is like $15 and the shipping is $15, right? And the VAT is the, whatever percentage on that $15 that is left, right? So that's another way to completely legally and legitimately reduce your VAT as well. The only complication in that is that you do have to, figure out like this, like how do you code? I mean, you probably do require some custom coding on your invoices as well to make sure to happen, So that's the other way. And then honestly, I see a lot of dropshippers just not really caring at all. Probably kind of similar to like US sales taxes. I don't know. There's probably a lot of folks that are probably supposed to pay some US state sales taxes, but probably are not registered. So this is also another thing where, look, it's your responsibility. But it's also your responsibility in how to think about how you manage your business and how you manage your risk as well, right? I'm never going to tell you to do anything that's not legit. I strongly recommend you find a legitimate solution. However, at the end of the day, like, it's basically a risk analysis, right? I think that the whole VAT treatment, the VAT authorities right now, they're focusing on the big fish, Amazon, eBay, like they have no possible way to really go after, like even medium or larger size e-commerce folks, So again, take your responsibilities. Don't take that as any kind of like indication what you should not do. But however, I do think that there's going to be a little bit of leeway as well.
So obviously one of the benefits of someone working with you, you can guide them on making the best decision, right?
Yeah, no, it's something, these are, I do have a lot of offline conversations, because there are creative solutions as well.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that during that process, like I was just working like just all the time to figure out like what the heck this even means.
It's like the Facebook bans, it never ends, man.
Yeah, and no one even knows. Even accountants don't know. Like if you find some bad accountant, they're gonna be like, you're shipping from China? I don't know how that works. Like they don't even understand. Like how does this all work, right? But yeah, we are, I mean, look, the way I think about things is that, we act as your partner in the supply chain. And that means everything. I mean, it's not just sending out goods, right? It means that like, okay, there's that issue. We're going to figure out like at least how to advise you, right? Even if you have to pay more, we're going to tell you, okay, this is how you have to do it, right? So you don't get in trouble. Stuff like, factory issues, like factory burns down, for example, we're going to tell you, we're definitely not going to lie to you about COVID outbreaks makes everything a lot worse. Who knows, right? We're going to let you know. And we no one's going to be able to promise you that everything is going to be perfect. If they do, they're 100% lying to you. That's not how the supply chain works. It's not how Facebook works, for example, right? Similar to, I think that what you kind of tell your audience and your clients as well. It's like, look, like you can't guarantee that you're going to solve all your problems with Facebook bans for forever, but we're going to be here for you and constantly doing our job to find the right knowledge, to figure out the right solutions to problems, so you can at least figure out how to solve them as opposed to it just bring down your business.
100%, man. So guys, listen, Dio, how can they find you? And we'll plug you in a sec. So how do they find you?
Yeah, so I'm gonna just post some links down below. Actually, the best way if you want to actually work with us, so again, you do have to have some volume. You have to have like 10 to 30 orders per day, or at the very least, you're very confident in scaling up. I'll send 2 links below in the comments, actually. One is just going to be our website. The fastest way to engage with us is probably just, chat with us on our website. We have a live chat, tell our team about what you're going through. And then, if it's a good fit, we'll set you up with a call. And then the other link I'm going to send below is we actually have a free course as well. I created it to for dropshippers, how you think about like using AliExpress, how you think about scaling up, how do you think about like actually building like a 7-8+ figure business on the supply chain, completely free. It's not the sexiest course. What we do is not sexy, but it's knowledge that you need. So I'm going to post that below as well. And the only thing that we also have a Facebook group as well. So the only thing I ask that if you want to get the course is join our Facebook group. It's a great group. We have a lot of discussions around operational logistics. I update there all the time. And yeah, so that's how you can find us.
Guys, I put my name next to his. I personally recommend him from my own personal experience, and several of my own clients have come to me having already worked with him with the best of words. The guy that recommended me to him does probably $1 million a month in volume across European markets. So yeah, like he will handle everything pretty much from the second that an order is placed to it hitting their door, right? Everything in between, lead times, stock, inventory, honest transparency, all the way through. So check them out, connect with them. If you're serious in this game, you want to do something right in the short term and build something in the long term, he's your guy. So.
All right. Thank you so much, John.
No worries, guys. Thanks for joining us.
All right. It was fun. Thank you. Bye, everyone.